Welcome to Between the Poles, the podcast where we dive deep into the heart of the pole community. I'm your host, Caroline. Here, it's not just about the tricks and the spin, it's about the stories, the people, and the connection that make our community so special. Every episode, we sit down with pole artists, studio owners, and inspiring members of the community to talk about their journeys, challenges, and passions. So grab your favorite drink, get comfy, and let's get real. This is Between the Poles.
Hi, Emily. Welcome on Between the Poles. Thank you so much for being here today with us.
Hello. Thank you for having me.
You're so welcome. I am so excited to get into this conversation. I've been following you on Instagram for quite some time. I have a sneaky suspicion that our viewers and our listener, probably the majority of them would know who you are. And if not, I think this is a great opportunity for them to get to know you a little bit better. I kind of always start this podcast by asking our guests the same question. Can you tell us a little bit about your pole journey, where you're at today, how that started, and kind of how did you even find pole?
Yeah, great question to start off with. And I find really fascinating because we all have like such a varied like approach to pole and like how we got here. So I've been pole dancing for almost 8 years. I had that like realization the other day. My 8-year pole anniversary will be in March. And I was like, oh my God, it's been 8 years already. Time is going by like way too fast. I started in chiropractic school, which was a really interesting choice. Prior to that, I was in more like aerial circus. I really enjoy the like hammock or sling, depending upon which one you call the like looped silk apparatus. Had been doing that on and off for probably like 4 or 5 years. Just like I would go into one class a week, and it was my like I'm working out without really like working out, because prior to that I was involved in like more traditional sports, so like soccer, basketball. I threw the javelin in college, like really traditional sports background. Graduated from undergrad, and I was like, I don't really want to go back to like that structured of training where you like practice every single day, but I do enjoy working out and like feeling good in my body. Found a like circus aerial studio, did that for a few years, decided to go to chiropractic school, and was getting fabric burned with the drops that I was doing in my fabric or my like hammock class. I don't know how much you know about chiropractic school, but it's a lot of like touching, like, and figuring out like this is a bone and this is a muscle, and I'm like, my skin is open, like, oh my God, you can't touch me right there. So I was like, I either have to like regress in my hammock skills, which didn't spark like a lot of joy, or switch to a different apparatus where I'm not getting burned while like I'm in school. So one of my TAs, actually, like teacher assistants, she taught at a pole studio, and we would talk about like circus stuff, aerial stuff, like all that sorts of things, like kind of in between lessons. And I was like, I'm gonna go take a class with Nikki. Like, fuck it. Like, let me go see if I like pole. If I don't like pole, whatever, I'll just like continue training on the hammock. And I felt like I literally fell in love. It was weird to have her be teaching me, because I'm like, you were literally just grading me on like my exam earlier today, and now you're telling me to pretend like I have a flashlight in my vagina and I'm like spotlighting the wall. And so I'm like, this is like a little bit too much for me. So I switched to like not having her be my instructor. But yeah, I've been consistently pole dancing ever since, which was like 2017, somewhere in there. Yeah.
I have a lot of questions.
Okay.
Yeah, I'm just a curious little Nancy, and I always want to know like everything. Also, because I feel a lot of people start pole, we all have like a different background. You said you fell in love with it. What was it about pole that really kind of interested you and made you kind of stick with it?
Yeah, so I consider myself to be kind of a weirdo, where I love being a beginner at things because it gives you like permission to be bad. And as somebody that has some like perfectionistic tendencies, I'm like, I can't be mad at myself because I've like have never done this. So I get to be like shitty at something, and everyone's like, yeah, it's normal. And so I think the big part of pole that I like is like that continuously happens, regardless of whether you're like a true beginner or you're like learning a new trick. There's this like, I get to be bad at it because I've never done this before, and then I get to work really hard to be good at it, and then you like start learning the next trick. So there's like always I don't know, some dopamine hits that happen. Which is kind of different than like my like other sports background where it's like, yeah, you can get better at soccer, but like you're just getting better at like kicking the ball or like manipulating the ball. And like that, I don't know, that doesn't spark like as much joy as
Feel now that I've been filming, and for viewers and listeners, for you, maybe it won't make sense because I'm not sure yet in what order everything is going to be posted. But I've, at this point, have filmed with a lot of our guests, and then a lot of people say the same thing as you, and I would agree. I feel like we're kind of junkies, just for the next dopamine rush, the next trip, or the next choreo, the next class, and that kind of keeps us coming. I feel like a lot of people are also really interested in kind of just, there's so much in pole between like strength and choreo and flexibility and mobility, and yeah, you can have a move, but there's so many different entries. There's variation of the grips you can do for that move. There's exits, right? Like there's kind of always something new that keeps us on our toes.
Yeah, I think for me, it's like the non-linear progression. So, like I still like running, and I'm like, if I want to get better at running, I'm still doing like the same thing. I'm just going faster. But like you said with pole, it's like, okay, like I can invert like from 80 bajillion different positions, and what I choose to do after an invert is, sky's the limit depending upon like what I feel like doing that day. And so I don't know, every session is like brand new. Maybe we get bored too easy. Maybe that's the like theme with pole dancers.
Yeah, I don't know. I feel it's a mix for me. In my case, I feel it's a mix of different things. There's periods of my life where I'm like, I want to learn something new every class. I want to try different things. And then there's other times where I'm like, you know what? I want to work on this combo to make it look cute and to not be kind of just lost in the air, just trying to get to the next move, like kind of polish it out. And I think it kind of depends on where we're at, how you're feeling each day, right? Like, yeah, totally. I also kind of ask this to everybody because I know we're all really different. Because you had a sports background and because you had been, say, in the circus arts, when you did go to your first class, were you already able to lift your body weight? How was that class specifically?
Yeah, I remember the majority of my discomfort being switching from like a soft apparatus to like a hard apparatus. Versus like, oh, these moves are like physically demanding for me. I'm like, oh, this is like uncomfortable because I'm not used to this feeling on my skin. I made it through the first like intro series because the studio that I went to was like a 6 to 8 week series class, and they wanted to like start teaching us how to do like the setup for an invert. Well, hammock, to get onto the sling at the level that I was, you had to invert to like get started. And so I just inverted like immediately. The first time that I watched her do it, I was like, oh, score. Like I just didn't know how to put my hands. Like, here we go. And that blew a lot of people's minds because they're like, what the fuck? And I was like, oh, like if you knew the amount of like shit that I have done prior to this, like it wouldn't really be that like shocking to you. Which squirrel moment off of this is one of the reasons why I say like ranting, like comparing yourself to people in class is like kind of dumb because you have no idea. Even though I was still in like an intro class, like I had, I started when I was maybe like 29, 30. I started sports at 4. And so I had from like 4 for 29 of like moving my body. And if you hadn't, then we're not apples to apples. Our intro points are like very different.
That is such a good point, and that I tell my student, but we're all human, right? So I also remember being in my first class and then seeing people be able to lift their body weights, and that was not me. But like you said, depending on your background and what your baggage was coming to those first classes, like it took me a long time to invert. And I can tell you that my first like 6 months of inverting was not cute. It was not graceful. It was not controlled. But we all start somewhere, right? And you build those foundation and it gets better because you had that background. And I know it's not the same apparatus. I do feel though for other students that I teach and stuff like that, people that do have a sling background or hammock or hoop and all that, I feel there's a lot of similarities at some point in some of the range of movement, in the strength required. from that kind of class that you started, how, not fast, but how was that journey? Like, did you pick it up quite easily? And then what kind of kept you coming? Was it like your teachers, the community? Like, yeah, how was that?
Yeah, I would say I picked up some aspects of like pole pretty easy, more the like strength stuff because like I had like a baseline level of strength. There was some stuff that was different because hammock is obviously like your hands are farther apart because you have the two poles versus just the one pole. And strength is position specific. So sometimes when you're like, why the fuck can I do it on one apparatus? But not on another apparatus. And I'm like, well, your shoulders are like apart versus like next to your chest for like the same inverted move, right? And these are like totally different positions. So your strength might like not necessarily transfer. And so yeah, some things I'm like, oh, I just like need to figure out how to like arrange/engage my muscles in like a slightly different position. But the harder part that I had was the like fluidity and like dance-y aspect of pole. And it's funny now because that's like the only style of pole that I like choose to do. I've kind of like given up on the like strength and like power parts of pole. And like more focused on like low flow and like base work, heel work stuff now. But at the beginning, like a body wave. Oh my God, I should go through my videos and find my first body wave. It was like a foreign concept for me to be independently like move my spine, like to the point where I don't know how many different times I asked my instructor, like I literally do not understand what you are doing with your body. Like I can cat cow, and like beyond that, I like cannot grasp what I'm supposed to get my body to do. So more of those elements were the things that I struggled with.
I feel like you kind of started answering that question already, but right now in this exact moment, how would you describe your pole style? Like, what do you like? What are you training for yourself? How would you describe, your pole right now?
Yeah, I would say it's pretty like grounded. I make a joke, like I train with other people every Tuesday, and I'm like, I'm gonna leave the ground for like one moment today. I'm gonna get my like singular invert on each side, like check it off the list. The same with spin pole. Like I have a like spin pole routine where I'm like I just force myself to be on spin pole for a moment, but I've always gravitated towards static. I don't particularly love spinning. And so, yeah, I kind of started like power pole, tricks, static, like up in the air things. And it's like slowly gone down to the ground where if I don't have to leave the floor, I am not going to. No, thank you.
I love that. And I love that our viewers and our listeners get to hear that as well. I feel like a lot of us kind of always pushing boundaries and I'm like, you don't need to be super high doing crazy things to have an amazing time doing pole.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe I feel like more of my students should hear this and like put that in their bag and be like, maybe today I can just have fun, explore movement around my pole. And there's a lot of hard things you can actually get done from the floor.
Yes, I feel like that's a really common misconception is like trick pole is like harder than like low flow pole, and I'm like, bitch, no, low flow floor work is like it's so hard. Like to make things look like as easy as people do when they enjoy the like lower style of pole, like floor based pole, takes so much like control and body awareness, and that takes a lot of strength. So yeah, I don't know if you don't like to go up the pole or it's scary. I talk to a lot of people where they're like, my classes are scary because I'm doing stuff like really high. And I'm like, don't go to that class then. Like go. You have options. Go to a different class. Or I don't know. Except that being scared is like kind of part of some people's experience with like being up off the ground. So you got options.
I also really like when I have a lot of students that are really trick based and they do amazing and they're at higher levels than I am, and I'm like, you do you. And then they will come and take choreo class and they're like, oh my God, I've never sweat this much. I am puffing for air. And I'm like, yeah, because you're like, just like you said, super slow control. You're still engaging so much muscle depending on like what you're doing and and we're repping a lot to try to remember this choreo. And like, there's such a physical aspect to it as well. And I feel like, yeah, you can just have a really well-rounded workout with either or. Like, yeah. And I love people that do a little bit of everything as well, because I feel there's like pros and cons and everything. Yeah, when I don't go super high, I'm not afraid to die, but I also really enjoy working on my climb and making that look good, right? And I love that pole has so many different options for people, and you can pick what you like and then work on that.
Yeah. Yeah, same. And that's where I think earlier like I kind of misspoke where I was like, oh, we get bored. I think we're like boredom averse. So we pick something where it's like I can go do 80 bajillion different things. Like, do I, in theory, do I want to go up the pole today? Do I want to do spin pole? Do I want to do static pole? Do I want to like hyper focus on one trick or just like put a bunch together? Yeah, options are endless.
Yeah. And then I will give you whiplash because I want to move on, because this is like the crunchy part, the part that I was really interested in. And I think maybe the part that our viewers and listeners are really interested in. It's your online presence. That's how I found you. It's through Instagram. You know what? I'm just going to let you talk about it. How did all of that start? How did you start on Instagram? Where did you start to where you're at now? What is the passion behind your account that fuels it? And yeah, can you touch up a little bit on that?
Yeah. So, where to start with this? So, where I typically start this story is I was in chiropractic school. I was in my like clinical portion where I was working at the student clinic and started like you have to like have like certain requirements. Like you have to like adjust so many different people. You have to do so many different rehab sessions, et cetera, et cetera. And they recommend that you like lean into your community to try and find people that are like willing to have you be their patient. And my main source of community outside of school was my pole studio. And so I like went into classes and was like, hey, like, I'm able to like help you with your body ailments at like a free or reduced cost, depending upon like a wide variety of different factors. So if you have things that you're struggling with, come see me. Like, obviously I understand what you're doing because we were in class together yesterday, and then I can just like help you with whatever you have going on. And I remember one time I was walking to go treat a pole dancer, and I'm like, I feel like this could be like a specialty. Like I could specialize in treating pole dancers. And I kind of dismissed it because I was like, no, I've never seen anybody do this. Like I've seen people like hyper focus in like CrossFitters or runners or golfers, but I don't know if there's like enough of a need for there to be a like pole specific person. So I started doing some deep diving and I was like, oh no, like there actually like is like a pretty good need for this and like a pretty high demand. It turns out that there's a lot of injuries that happen in this like patient population or like athletic population. And so I was like, okay, cool. Like that's going to be like my niche of the sports world. And I know people are like, is pole considered a sport or an art? I consider it a sport because we're doing like very athletic things with our body. So I have like a sports medicine master's and like a postdoctorate in sports medicine too. And so I was like, where are the gaps in my like sports / like pole circus knowledge, and started seeking out like hella continuing education courses to be like, okay, like football and pole dancing are very different, even though they're both like technically sports. So I was, cramming in a bunch of like knowledge gaps. And as I got closer to graduating, I was like, this is going to be like what I build my like practice around. At that time, I planned on working for a chiropractor. I was planning on working in Montana, and I was like so excited to tell her my like business plan, because that's where I like started circus, was in Montana. And so I was like, I'm just gonna like really like reconnect with the like circus community in Montana, and I'm gonna be the person to go to in like this part of the state. And I got met with basically like a fuck you no, like these people will not be coming into like my clinic. Yeah. And that was like, I was like, what? Like, excuse me? Yeah, kibosh. And that was really devastating because I was like so excited and had like had this plan for like years at this point where I'm like investing in continuing education courses. I had like started to like kind of post content on Instagram with the goal of like building my in-person clinic. And so, yeah, I was like pretty heartbroken on like a lot of different levels with the like reaction that I got from the person that was my boss. And I was like, okay, like how do I was like, how do I like ease her into this? Because it often gets like misconstrued. Like people have, like their pre-existing like beliefs around pole dancing and just like circus stuff in general. So I was like, I'll just like kind of ride it out and then we'll just like circle back once I'm like more established like in this clinic. And then COVID happened. I was practicing for 6 weeks when the world shut down. And I was like, well, that is shitty on like a lot of different levels, right? Like that was, just like a trying time of life. So I suddenly found myself with a lot of free time. I was still working, but the clinic hours were reduced. And I went from like, there was like 8 of us in the office to we were all like stacking our schedule. So there was only like one provider and like one patient in at a time to try to like reduce everybody's exposure. So I had, way, way too much free time. And like, I don't do well being bored at all. And so I'm like, I can only like work out and I can only pole dance like so much. And I can only go for like take my dog for walks for so many walks a day. Like, what do I do with my time? And I'm like, well, I have all this knowledge. Like, it seems silly for me to not share it with people that are like overtraining or like are kind of in the same like trapped position where they're like, I bought a pole and like I want to learn, and then now I'm hurt, but like clinics are closed or like only doing like very limited.
I will say this because if I've learned anything from talking to anybody on this podcast and from being a teacher and having my own studio is, oh my God, overtraining is the plague for pole dancers. We do not take breaks. We do not.
No, not.
And I love that you
all.
say that too, because I'm like, yeah, I would 100% agree.
Yep. Yeah, it's a thing. And like it's one of those things where it's like if you don't know that like you can overtrain or ways to like avoid overtraining, you're very easily gonna like go down that rabbit hole. And it's not just with pole, it's with any person that like enjoys an athletic hobby. Like someone starts running and they'll go from like sitting on the couch to like trying to run 10 miles. And I'm like, right? Like maybe we progressively like build up to that. So with my journey, I just like started posting like I'm seeing people complain about this. I'm seeing people like do things that seem like pretty chaotic to me. I'm seeing people say that they're having to stop pole because they have something going on. And I'm like, well, there's a lot of, I'm going to call them like basic, but they're obviously like involved concepts, but like basic exercise and sports science, like principles and ways of training that aren't really talked about in the pole space. So I just started like taking, training load, for an example. Like I see a bunch of posts geared towards runners. I'm just going to like make one geared towards pole dancers and like rate of perceived exertion versus like how many attempts of a trick that you are performing. Like these are things that if you don't know them, you wouldn't be able to apply them to your own training. And so I know sports medicine, I know pole dancing combined. And at the beginning, my goal was really just to like not be bored and then hopefully be able to like get more local people once COVID ended to come into my clinic. Well, a bunch of chaotic stuff happened in my personal life and I ended up quitting that job and moving and then realized that like I could help people online because a lot of clinics shifted to like telehealth during this time of life. And I'm like, well, I could too. Like, I don't necessarily need to touch you to help you with your injuries. There are like perks of like being able to work with somebody in person, but you can get a lot done with like training, load management, and like exercise prescription. And so once again, like one day I was just like, I could do this online. And so I hired a business coach and built out a program to be able to like rehab injury coach people virtually. And then flash forward. Gosh, I started in 2020, so we're coming into like 5-ish years of me primarily working with people virtually.
I have 101 questions.
Okay.
Okay. I'm not even sure where to start. You know what? Let me start with this. You said you started kind of posting more during COVID, and I get that. A lot of people did that, right? Because I guess the need for online present really showed. And then I guess I'm not going to offend anybody. I don't follow 101 people, but I do feel like you really did tap in a niche where when I did go online on Instagram trying to find a bunch of people, there is not 1,000 people out there that do what you do. So I think like great job on finding a niche and really kind of also thank you for giving people so much info for free. Like if you follow, like anybody listening, if you follow Emily online, you get a lot of free info that is really nice. I also really enjoy how you dumb it down, how you make it accessible, right? Because they're posts and we're all kind of mindlessly scrolling. And I feel your post is just like the perfect to like keep my attention just long enough for me like to read that and kind of think about it. And then so it's not just like, oh, I have to sit here and read this for an hour so like that's amazing. And I've asked this to a couple of other guests on the podcast. When did you feel like your online presence started kind of grabbing traction? Because I'm sure you had been posting for a little bit. And right now, like I just had a look while you were chatting on your account, you're just short of 30,000 people following you on that account. When did you see that kind of take off?
Yeah, I feel like I would have to like go back and really think about this. I feel like it spiked probably in the past like 2 years. Like I was like pretty slowly like building things, and then people either love or hate the way that I like communicate via my posts. I tend to be like pretty direct and like kind of like bullet point-y, and I don't know if I like necessarily enjoy it. I like to point out like gaps in things where I'm like, this is the like normal, like accepted way of like approaching things. But from my lens, it seems like we're missing like this point, and this point. And I feel like people are used to me now saying what I have been saying, because I've been saying pretty much the same thing the entire time I've been posting. But when I first started, it was like a left field, like, hey, you should structure your training. Like, you shouldn't just train every single day for like the entire year. Like, you should be cross training as somebody that is wanting to throw their body around an apparatus in like wonky positions. There were more than a handful of times where what I would consider to be just like basic exercise stuff that I would post geared towards pole dancers, where it riled people the fuck up because it was different than they were used to hearing. Yeah. This is like, it's actually like kind of funny because I've had like full on like hate posts about me. I've had people go live like about posts and like rip my content and like rip me apart. Doesn't happen too much anymore. Every once in a while I'll post something that I'm like, this is gonna hit a wound for like some people because I'm pointing out something that they could be doing differently, and I'm assuming that they take it as me saying that they're doing something wrong or that there's something wrong with them. And I'm like, no, I don't want you to get hurt. Like, I really truly like don't want you to have to stop pole dancing because of something that like you just didn't know about your body. And so I can help like fill those knowledge gaps. And so yeah, how I grew my following is I had enough of those like kind of what the fuck is she saying type of posts take off, and then people either like liked what I was saying or didn't, but the people that liked it started following me, and then they would share it to their people, and then obviously like more and more I grew.
We'll get kind of more into it as well because I do have other questions on but because we just touched up on this, and I have been asking a few people, not everybody, but a few people on here have quite the following, and you touched up a little bit on, you know what, some people really hate it and some people really went out there and kind of like shred me. How do you react to that? What is your mindset to that? What would you say to anybody that's kind of on the fence about posting anything they do about pole online? Like, yeah, do you have any opinion on that?
I feel like since I've been doing this for so long, I'm a little bit like, I don't know, like numb to it, kind of. Like, I'm a human and I'm like actually like a very sensitive person. So it like, I don't love it when people are like, oh, this post like enraged me, because I'm like, oh, I feel like you like misunderstood like my intent behind it. Because I never am like posting things to be like, fuck you, you're like doing this wrong. And I'm like, hey, I'm usually having people come to me because they're injured and they're like bawling their eyes out because they don't know if they're going to be able to continue pole. And if I have the same like topic come up like from more than one person, I'm like, okay, this is probably a belief that a lot of people have. Let me point out like a different way of looking at this, a different way of approaching it. And so that obviously like riles people up. So how I handle it is really just the unfortunate like understanding / belief that like you're never going to make everybody happy. And if you have the intent of like sharing good things and sharing things that like you care about, or you have like a gift too, you're doing everyone a disservice by not sharing that. So that's kind of the like phrase that I go back to when I have a post go kind of like left, where I'm like, that's not, you're interpreting it differently than I intended it. But I will circle back to like, it would be a disservice for me to not share the knowledge that I have with people, knowing that people could benefit from me sharing it.
If you see that one of your posts is kind of a hot topic, or like debates are starting in the comments or whatever, do you feel at any point it kind of holds you back a little bit the next time you want to share on that topic? Do you change the way you approach it? Or you kind of tell yourself, you know what, I will share how I share it because people will have their opinions no matter what?
Yeah, I feel like I've gotten better at kind of anticipating where people are going to like try to poke holes in my argument or like potentially like misunderstand me. So my like approach like creating content is usually in the caption that like people are like, but what about whatever? And so I'll like V1 it and then like reread it and be like, okay, I can see people taking this point like this way or this way. I want to make sure that they interpret it like this way. So I'll like add another sentence in. So there's more, I don't know, like filtering that happens on like my end, where I'm like, I'm going to try my best to make sure that I'm not going to be misunderstood. And then I also monitor like my own energy level with things. So like there's one post that the first time I posted about the content, it like pissed people off. And it was one that it's actually, to me, it's like kind of funny that like your shoes, you being in like pleasers and you being in ballet shoes on point are two different foot positions. And for some reason, people will say, if I have a shoe close by, that like being like this in your pleasers is being on point, where in this shoe, if you were on point, your toes would be the contact point on the floor. Yeah. And so like to me, which I guess you could disagree with me, calling this position on point doesn't really make sense, like based on like ballet terms and like generally accepted terms of like positions for the body. And so I posted that and I was just like, hey, you know, like I think maybe we should be aware that like there are two different foot positions. Riled people up. And I want to like re-talk about it, because I want to talk about like ankle injuries and like things that you can do to make your body feel better in heels. But I'm like, oh man, the first time I talked about this, like people got like really upset for some reason. It's still confusing to me to this day. And so I am having like a pause of like, okay, I don't necessarily want to like have that like backlash happen again, but I do think this is an important topic. And so I either need to like mentally prepare for like a big reaction. And then for me, a lot of it is like, I'll just not look at my phone as much. I'll like not look at Instagram as much. Or I will like reassess how I'm going to share this information, trying to make it be like more apparent that I'm not like, I don't necessarily like care. Really, to me, it's confusing, but like if you want to call this on point, cool, but we need to be able to differentiate that like this position versus this position are different. Yeah. And it's going to affect your movement differently and your ankle differently. So,
and you know what? Of everything you share, one, don't feel like anything you share is like crazy or would warrant like any kind of hate, first off. Two, I'm surprised of everything you share. That would also have surprised me, right? Like, I'm like, really? That's the post that would like kind of gather fire and I guess start kind of comments of just like, what is going on?
Yeah.
And
The
then it
last
kind of
one,
brings me there. Oh, go for it.
I would say the last one, to me, it's funny because same where I'm like, I share some stuff where I'm like, I don't really know if like people are going to love this because I'm going to be inadvertently telling them that like they need to approach their pole training differently and people don't like change. People don't feel like don't like feeling like they're doing something wrong. But me saying like being in your pleasers and being on point are two different foot and ankle positions. I didn't expect that to like go off ever. The last one that was very confusing that people went off about was my last birthday post, which is so dumb. One of the lines in the caption was honestly, it was about me getting divorced because I got divorced like a year and a half ago. And I'm like, my life is like really different now. And I'm learning that like just because it's different, it doesn't necessarily mean that it's bad. And so for some reason, people took that as like pole training, like you could train differently and it doesn't necessarily mean that it's bad. And like went on this like rant about how is she 35 years old and hasn't like grasped that you can approach something differently and it doesn't necessarily mean bad. And I was like, bitch, that was about my divorce and like my life status right now. But like, okay, I guess I'm a behind and like kind of like a bad person in like their mind because like I said that one line in my caption. So people stay just like being pissed about stuff if they want to be pissed about it. And like,
But you know what kind of, I'm not sure if like shock, because can I really say I'm shocked? Because I know there's just people out there, right? But I'm like, if you're following your account, you kind of know what you get, right? Like, I followed you knowing what I was going to see. And then two, I'm just like, how could you be so riled up about somebody else's post? Just unfollow if like you're so outraged, right? I don't really get online hate. I've never commented negatively on anybody's anything on at any point on the internet. So I'm always so confused when people are so riled up on an account that they choose to follow from their own free will. And I'm also like, of anybody we follow, I feel like you give a lot of your time and a lot of free, amazing advice. So for you to get hate, I'm like, what? You're like helping so many people out of just like being so nice and be like, you know what? I feel there's a misunderstanding. Let me put my knowledge into this with the background I have in sport medicine. And I'm like, thank you. And it just blows my mind that people would be so mean to the reception of that. I'm like, hi.
and that's a lot of like my perception of it too, where I'm like, why, why, and also I don't know, like at this point, I spent a lot of time online, and like at this point, I'm like, okay, some people just are like really looking for conflict. They get some benefit out of like commenting or sliding into people's DMs with hate, whatever. And so I'm like, I'll just like block you, and like you can move on. You don't have to see my content anymore. Have fun. Have fun doing you. I'm going to stay, posting my little black and white slides every single day. It'll be fine.
And then what you just said kind of brings me to my next question as well. How have you throughout this journey and to this day stayed so consistent on what you post? So first off, kind of that. And then second off, how do you choose what you post? Because you touched up a little bit on it being like, oh, I saw kind of not mistakes, but maybe a lack of information. And then I chose to kind of talk about it or post about it. At this point, you've made a lot of posts, you touch up on a lot of things. How are you today kind of choosing what you're going to post, and how are you staying consistent in that?
Yeah. One of my, I don't know if a superpower is the right word, but if I'm going to say something that I'm really good at, it's being consistent with things. I'm not necessarily like the best at like really anything in the world, but I'm like, I can show up, right? Like I can clock in, I can do the best that I can for that day. And at this point, it's just like part of my routine where I'm like, every day I have to make a post for Instagram. And then ideally that post is going to like, trigger something in somebody where they like want to train differently, or for them to realize that like, oh, they don't have to have shoulder pain with pole dancing. And ultimately the goal is that they like come into like my business aspect of it and we find like some way to work together. But I do just enjoy sharing knowledge for the sake of sharing knowledge. And yeah, I've had people ask me this before and I'm like, I don't know like how I stay consistent. It's just a like checklist item that I have to do. Just like you like brush your teeth in the morning. For me, every single day, it's like you have to like make an Instagram post. When it comes to what I share, lately that has been like a little bit more of a struggle. I'm not going to lie, because I feel like I have said a lot of things. And I'm like, I don't know where else I like could share information, but I also do have to remind myself that like the post that you see, like your algorithm's different than somebody else's algorithm. And so there could be like really important posts that would change like how you approach your pole journey that Instagram just didn't show you for whatever reason. Or maybe you saw a post, 6 months ago and like the way that I worded it didn't like really register for you. So I can take that like same topic and slightly change it. So like for an example, there's like I have my like black and white posts, which I think are like kind of my standard things. And then sometimes I'll like make talking reels, and sometimes I'll do like thread little posts where it's like the same information, but just kind of shared slightly differently. And there'll be one where people will be like, oh, I just needed to hear you like actually say this out loud for it to register. Like reading it for whatever reason didn't really click. So I take a lot of the same topic posts and I just like refresh them and like portray them in like a slightly different manner. And or, well, I guess a few other things. I'll have people slide into my DMs and they'll ask me questions. And if it's something that I think is like relevant to make a post about, I will make a post about. I ask people on Mondays for things that they need help with. And I take a lot of those and I'm like, oh, if I were to respond to this in my stories, it would be like 20 stories. And that's like, I'm not going to sit and listen to myself talk for 20 stories in a row, but I can record a podcast episode about it, or I can take like one aspect of that and like make a post about it. I love scrolling through like Facebook groups and like Reddit forums, and people will pose questions on there. And sometimes the answers that people will give, I'll like agree with. And other times I'm like, oh, if everyone's like, this is the like resounding theme of the comments after, and I think that they're like misguided, I'm like, cool, here's another way of like looking at it. So I'll make a post doing that.
Which I love that, because
this might be like
manner, right? People learn different things. So I love that if you see, oh, you know what, I shared this like this, but I could share it in a different way or reword it so that other people can learn in that way too, because we're not the same, right? And people do process information in different ways. So having those different options is great. I also kind of wanted to we've touched up a lot on your Instagram because that's where I follow you, and that's kind of how I found your platform. You do have other platform and other things you do. Can you touch up a little bit on this? Because you're a business person, and let's talk about it too.
I do run a business, which is the like interesting part of Instagram, I think, is that I don't think as many of my followers realize that like they could work with me. It's not me just like posting content for like the sake of posting content. This is how I like pay my bills, is like getting people to like come into my business. So I have kind of like a tiered system in my brain is how I organize them. So they'll like bottom tier, I have a bunch of like webinars and like PDF downloads, and kind of they're called like lower ticket things where they're anywhere from like $35 to like $100-ish, where I'm like, if you're wanting to learn from me, but you're not necessarily like at the point where you like want or like need to invest a bunch of money, here's like ways that you can learn about your shoulders or your hips or whatever. And then the next tier up are like courses. And so I have like how to not fuck up your shoulders pole dancing course, which like expands upon the like shoulder webinar and gives you close to the same information as if I were to like assess your shoulders. And so it's kind of a like watered down version of the assessment that I would do live. You would just like do it via the course. The most recent one, well, I guess I actually have two new recent ones. I was like, oh, I made one for like pole instructors, like how to not fuck up your students pole dancing. That one is probably my like most favorite course because I get to like help instructors kind of fill their knowledge gaps, ultimately with the goal of like less people getting injured, because it's not fun to like not be able to do your hobby. And I was at that point, or job, if you like pole dance for a job. I injured myself pretty early on in my pole journey and really struggled to find somebody to like help me like recover from my pole injury, and then realized I'm like, well, like I know enough about this. It's just hard to like treat your own body. And so I'm like, let me help other people like not have to go through this same like emotional struggle on top of the like physical struggle that comes with recovering from an injury. So the instructor course is to help like reduce injuries in students. And then I just made one on pregnancy and postpartum, like pole dancing, which is super fun. That one's only been out for not even a week yet. So TBD on how people receive that one. But I'm excited to have that out in the world because there's not a lot of resources for people in those journeys of life either. And then the like highest tier in my pyramid.
Pregnant. And then as I was opening my studio, I was pregnant with my second one. And I feel that there's not a lot out there for pregnancy and pole. So I love that you created that. And thank you for making that available for people to purchase. I also kind of wanted to ask you a little bit, how are you managing your business? How are you coming up with kind of what you want to create? How do you go about it for anybody listening and kind of trying to see if they're trying to kind of live off a pole or whatever? Can you share a little bit on that?
Can you say that again? How do I organize my business?
How did you start your business, basically? How do you choose what do you focus on in your business? I know a lot of people that pole kind of would want to be able to support themselves out of pole. How did you kind of start that? How are you managing your business now?
Yeah. This is actually like a nice segue. So the tippy part of my pyramid is where I started. So I started with like one-on-one like movement assessments and like rehab plans. And it started because I hurt myself and I was like, okay, I want to get back to pole dancing. I went into my like local chiropractor and was like, hey, like I was doing like this trick. My shoulder now hurts. And I had to be like, okay, let me show you like a video of this trick and like try to explain to you like where like I have to engage and like where the load is going. They don't really have any concept of things. And so it was like a really frustrating, like, I'm like, I need you to tell me like what is happening to my own body. And like beyond that, like I can go do my rehab myself. But like I am really tired of like setting up my camera and like trying to figure out like what do I need my shoulder to be able to do. And so I didn't even need them to like fully rehab me. I'm like, just tell me what you're seeing. And it was such a like hair pulling experience that I was like, it should not be this fucking hard. Like a runner can go into a clinic and say, I'm having knee pain with running. And the person would be able to like look at them and be like, oh, we need to work on your like hip stability. We probably need to put you in different shoes based on like what I'm seeing happening in your body. Maybe we need to do some like tweaking for like ankle biomechanics, whatever. And so I'm like, why am I having to like jump through fucking hoops with the knowledge that I have to like get just like a little bit of help, just like a crumb, like please, for the love. And I'm like, if I'm having to do this with like 8 years of education around the body, I can't imagine somebody that like doesn't have the background knowledge that I have going into a clinic and like trying to explain to somebody like what I need my body to do and like what positions I'm having a hard time in. And so I was like, I'm going to do it. like I'm literally just gonna be the person that like pole dancers can reach out to if they're struggling with things. So I actually have like a checklist. I don't have a name for it, but I went through like everything that I would expect a pole dancer's shoulder to be able to do, and like how I would assess each part of it, and like what would I expect their spine to be able to do. Little checklist, and then started throwing out there. Like once again, I'm just like, hey, like I'm here. Like if you need help with this, and yeah, slowly but surely, I have like built up clientele around that, and then from like that being like the only part to work with me is like you could only come see me if you are hurt. And I was like, okay, people have to get hurt to learn all of the stuff that I am teaching them on like how to not hurt themselves. And so there was one day, once again, I feel like a lot of my like business is like one day I just like have this like idea, and one day I heard the same story for probably the like 100th time, where I'm like, people think that this is how, I'm pretty sure it was like how to engage your arm in an overhead position. The cue shoulder blades down and back is like unfortunately the like prevailing cue for that position. And I'm like, if I hear somebody say that they hurt their shoulder because they were trying to do a one arm spin, and part of the reason why is because they don't understand shoulder biomechanics and how you actually stabilize your shoulder in that position, I'm going to lose my fucking mind. And so I took my little microphone right here and I stood in front of my pole. I'm going to pretend like this is my mic. And I was like, hello, friends, and welcome to a new series, How to Not Fuck Up Your Body Pole Dancing. This is how you engage your shoulder in this position. Please, for the love of God, stop using the cue, shoulder blades down and back, when your arm is up overhead. And from there, people loved it. I was like, oh, I could go like before the injury. Like I don't have to tell people like, oh, once you're hurt, I can help you. I could help you not get hurt. And that's where my like webinars came from. And then people were like, well, I want more information than just to like, this is how my shoulder works. Like in theory, like how does my shoulder actually move? And like, what do I need to work on for my individual body? So I created a course. And then people are like, well, what about my hips? What about my knees? What about whatever? And I'm like, okay, cool. We'll just do a how to not fuck up like every body part in the body. And then, yeah, then I realized that like I can have my message go farther if I start going towards instructors, because instructors teach, how many 10 people a class, however many people a class. So instead of going like 1 to 1 to 1, I can go 1 to many. And then upcoming, which I'm like really excited about, is I'm going to create self-paced rehab plans for people. So there's a barrier to working with me like one-on-one because like I'm expensive to work with, and I'll fully admit that. But not everybody has the resources to work with me one-on-one, but they still deserve like high quality access to whole specific rehab. So I have like concepts that I am in the process of like taking out of my brain and putting onto paper. And then I'm going to create like a basic shoulder rehab plan for pole dancers: elbow, wrist, hip, knee, ankle. So those are coming up soon.
That. Also, I love, and that's kind of a little bit what I was trying to communicate. I love that one, you're aware that not everybody has a resource. And that's kind of what I was touching on. I can't believe the amount of hate you could get putting free knowledge out there that people would usually need to pay. And I love that you have different tiers. So if you can't work one-on-one because you don't have the resources, I love that you still make that accessible for people. So then I'm like, please, haters, if you hear this, just realize that before commenting negatively on the amount of work you put to get all of us a little bit of knowledge. So super greatly appreciated. I don't want to keep you on there forever. I want us to have time to do the last segment here on the podcast. It's called The Last Grip. These are easier questions, shorter questions. You can give us as much or as little details as you want. They're just meant to be fun and for our audience, once again, to kind of get to know you a little bit better. Are you ready for the last grip?
I'm ready.
All right, let's do it. Coffee or tea?
Both, but at different times of the day. Coffee in the morning and tea in the afternoon.
Fair enough. Favorite song to dance to right now?
Ooh, I knew you were gonna ask this, and I like still couldn't decide. Sorry, I'm gonna look at my phone.
Okay.
What's I just created, and I can share my Spotify too. I have a playlist called Dark Femme Fatale, and I'm like, this is my favorite playlist lately. The song that I've been gravitating towards is called Boys Like You by Tannerelle. In question on whether or not I pronounced her name correctly.
I feel we all butcher names. That's fine. We try our best. That's the important part. Your most loved pole outfit or accessory?
Ooh, probably my 8-inch chrome pleasers are my favorite.
Heels or barefoot?
Heels.
One word to describe your relationship with pole.
Obsessed.
Mm-hmm. Spin or static?
Static.
Choreo or tricks?
Choreo.
Morning practice or evening practice?
Evening.
Love or hate conditioning?
On the pole, conditioning, hate. Off the pole, strength training, love.
That's all right. That's an acceptable answer. Can you tell us 2 or 3 people that you enjoy following that we should also give a follow to?
Ooh, yes. My friend Judy Gray, she's coffee_pole. She's like a edgework style human. Also love Jazzy K. And who else am I enjoying these days? Natalia Nightshade. They're all low flow, edgeworky humans, just slightly different styles.
I love that. What is your nemesis move?
Oh, anything elbow grippy.
And what's your favorite move?
Ooh, I love a diamond roll or a body wave. Yeah, both of those are.
All right. Well, thank you so much for being with us today, Emily. Absolutely love this conversation. Before I let you go, can you just tell our viewers and our listeners where can we find you? How can we support you?
So you can find me on Instagram. My Instagram handle is at dr.emilyrausch, so at Dr. Emily Rausch, and my website is dremilyrausch.com. And if you want to support me, I have a wide variety of different services that you can either purchase or book with me from the link in bio on my Instagram or on my website.
And I will put everything in the caption as well, so it's super easy to find. And thank you so much for being with us today, and I hope our viewer enjoyed it as much as I did.
Oh, I loved it. Thank you so much for having me.
You're so welcome. Thank you so much for tuning in to Between the Poles. If you enjoyed this episode, don't forget to subscribe, leave a review, and share it with your friends. Stay connected with us on social media, and we'll see you next time right here, Between the Poles.